Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Cotter, I stopped by today to renew the conversation that we had back in February. I asked you a number of questions then, and we haven't had a response, so I'd like to pursue them. We were talking about the IRS's role in combating foreign election spending. As you know, one of the dominant vehicles for influence in American elections these days is the so-called 501c4, which is an entity regulated by the IRS. And my questions to you had to do with what the IRS does to prevent foreign interests from laundering money through 501c4s and into our elections. Since February, we've learned a little bit more, in particular thanks to Senator Wyden's inquiries. We've learned that the National Rifle Association has accepted foreign donations. Now, the NRA claims that none of those donations go towards political expenditures, but given the fungible nature of money, that is a questionable assertion at best. What the NRA told Senator Wyden is that our review of our records has found no foreign donations in connection with a United States election. That's the way they phrased it. It sounds a bit of a lawyered answer. So I'd like to renew some questions and add some new ones. One is, and these can be questions for the record, I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head. Has the IRS investigated, or is it investigating, this claim by the National Rifle Association that the Russian money did not go to its election efforts? Second, how does the IRS ensure that foreign money is not entering our political system through outside organizations like LLCs and tax-exempt organizations? The 501c4 organizations are required to disclose their donors to the IRS, but I'm interested to know, first, what does the IRS do with that information? Does it forward it to FinCEN and other places? And second, what does it do when a potentially shell corporation emerges as the donor? I made a sort of snarky remark in my last question to you about what if it says Russian Influence LLC, a Delaware corporation. Presumably, somebody would want to look behind Russian Influence LLC and see who it's up to. Now, obviously, the Russians are not going to use such an obvious name, but the problem with shell corporations that obscuring our ability to know who's influencing our elections is a real one, and I'm interested in what the IRS does to probe through shell corporation information in dealing with politically active 501c4s. Do you coordinate with FinCEN? And also, I'd like an overview of what resources you devote to policing the rules about 501c4s, which takes me to a second but related question, which is that we see very often in the IRS filings entities that aver to you under oath that they are not spending any money at all in any effort to influence or attempt to influence state, federal, municipal, or other elections. I think it's question 15 on the form, as I recall it. I don't have it in mind. And then they run over to the Federal Election Commission and disclose that they spent $17 million or $35 million on electioneering advertisements. It seems to me that that predicates at least an inquiry as to whether somebody is perhaps not telling the truth on one or the other of those federal forms, and I'd like to know what steps the IRS is taking to make sure that those questions are in fact being answered truthfully to the IRS. Sure. So I know that's putting a lot on your plate, but I am sincere about trying to get these questions answered. We have not had a response to the February answers. I hope you will treat this as a priority and make sure that we do get answers to what I think are fair and sensible questions, particularly in the light of the election manipulations we have seen.
Certainly, Senator, those are fair questions, and we have been working on the response to your questions from the last hearing. It is accurate that the 501c4 organizations are required to submit donor lists to the Internal Revenue Service. Our focus in auditing those organizations is primarily on whether they are engaged in excessive political campaign intervention. It's not been focused on the source of the funds that are contributed to those organizations. And we will look in, at this point, we're not sharing any information to my knowledge with FinCEN or other organizations, but I take your question seriously, and we will look into it, I promise.
Thank you.
Sir.
Mr. Chairman, if it does turn out, particularly given all of the interest in this issue that has emerged, that the IRS is not, in fact, looking behind shell corporations and seeing what are the potential avenues for foreign influence through 501c4s, I would like to work with you and other members of the committee to try to make sure that they understand that they do have that authority to test these propositions. And similarly, if they're looking at the extent to which the 501c4 is focused on political activity, then particularly if they're taking a flat-out no at face value on the question, when that flat-out no appears to be belied by disclosures to state and federal election commissions, again, I think we ought to do what we can to make clear that the IRS has the authority to answer those questions and get back to us. So we'll see how this turns out, but I may very well be turning to the chairman to make sure that the IRS has the right authority and we're getting the right answers.